Welcome back. Beginning in February, Massachusetts and much of New England saw a shift in the weather pattern. What was a mild and dry January turned into a cold and snowy February. Joe Dellicarpini, a Norwood resident and Science and Operations Officer at the National Weather Service's Boston office, explains the reasoning for this weather shift and what to expect in the coming weeks.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joe Dellicarpini, a Norwood resident and meteorologist with the National Weather Service's Boston office down in Norton, Massachusetts. And I'm here to talk to you today about the winter of 2020 and 21, and specifically why has it become so much more active, really since the first part of February. It was pretty quiet and mild up until that, and then we kind of transitioned into a colder and snowier weather pattern. So we're going to talk about a few of the factors that are leading or causing that. So the first thing I want to show is just highlight a couple of the storms that have been more significant. This was the one from February 1st to February 2nd, kind of as we enter Groundhog's Day. And you can see much of southern New England received heavy amounts of snow, over a foot across much of the region, really from about Norwood on westward. We had a jackpot of nearly 2 feet across parts of the Merrimack Valley and a secondary max as you head across the border into southeastern New York. But you can also see a very sharp cutoff in the snow just to our east across from downtown Boston to the South Shore and into southern Rhode Island. That's where we had what's called a coastal front, where the milder air comes in off the ocean, and that actually caused a change over to rain during the afternoon and evening, and really lessened the accumulations. But we were kind of right on the western fringes of that front and stayed all snow for the most part. You can see a total of almost 11 inches of snow here in Norwood. And our second storm was over the Super Bowl weekend, February 7th. And this storm, we were kind of in the jackpot, as you can see here. About 8 to 12 inches max from southern Connecticut across northern Rhode Island and into eastern Massachusetts. And in fact, you can see our storm total there was nearly a foot. And most of that actually fell during about a 3 to 4 hour period during the afternoon when we got under one of the intense snow bands, which I'll talk about a little bit in a minute. So here's a quick look at our winter so far in Norwood. This is our observations that were taken at my house, close up to near Highland Cemetery. You can see very little, if anything, as we went through December and into January. And then you can see the two storms that are kind of highlighted here. If you look at the blue line, you can see a big jump here. This is the February 1st and 2nd storm. And then the second little bit of a jump here, which was the February 7th storm. And then since then, we've been melting just a little bit, but it's been pretty cold. So we haven't lost really a lot of the snow that we've built up so far. And we'll see how that goes as we head into spring. But for now, we've got some pretty good snow cover. So there's a couple of key features I want to talk about here that really drive our weather. One of them, we talk about El Nino, La Nina, some global patterns, but there's really more regional patterns that drive our winter weather throughout the season. And these kind of change, over a period of weeks. So for the most part, our weather patterns over the winter last from as little as 4 weeks to maybe as long as 6 or 7 weeks. And an extreme example of that was the 2015 winter, where we went from late January through February. We had all those blockbuster storms over a foot, it seemed every week. And that was about a 6-week active period. Right now, we're in about a 4-week active period. And I think as we get, another week or so, this pattern's going to kind of settle down. But just to talk about a couple of the factors that really are our main drivers, one of them here is called the North American Oscillation, or North Atlantic Oscillation sometimes. And it's essentially the pressure difference between Greenland and the Azores off the coast of Africa. It's just a measure of the pressure difference. So when it goes negative, and you can see here in the box, it's been negative pretty much since the start of the new year and right up till the middle of February. It favors a colder pattern in the eastern United States. It's a blockier pattern, meaning storms are slower moving. So any slower moving storm is obviously going to hang around a while and give us a longer duration, more precipitation. Sometimes it's rain, but sometimes it can be snow if all things come together. Now, as we head into the early part of March, you can see the forecast here is for the NAO to trend positive, and that's going to change our weather pattern eventually as we get into the early part of March. So that tends to favor a warmer or milder pattern, faster moving storms, and those tend to be a shorter duration, so we see less precipitation. A lot of times they'll also track inland. uh, toward the Great Lakes and result in a warmer storm, much like we saw Christmas Eve into Christmas Day, if you remember that. Now, the other part of the puzzle is called the Pacific North American pattern, known as PNA. And what that is, it's a measure of the jet stream, or the jet stream pattern over North America. So on the image on the right, you can see red, which indicate a ridge, which is warmer air, and in the east, there's a trough, which is the blue shading, which is colder air. So when it's positive, and it's been that way since, again, the first part of the new year, for the most part, with a couple of exceptions, that favors what's called a trough over the east, and I'll show that in a minute. But it favors colder air directed across the eastern U.S. When it goes negative, which you can see is the forecast for that to happen as we head into early March, we have what's called a ridge in place over us that tends to favor milder air across the eastern United States. So again, between the two, and I'll show that in a second, that really is what sets up our winter pattern. So if we put both together, you can see we've had a combination of a negative NAO and largely a positive PNA, and that favors colder weather, slower moving storms, and favors snow. It doesn't guarantee it, but it puts us in the ballpark if other things come together for us to get more snow. And again, going into early March, we're kind of going to flip the pattern. So we're going to go to a positive NAO and a negative PNA, which is going to favor overall a milder weather pattern. We should see the storms start to track either over New England or to our west, which kind of favors more either snow to rain or just rain entirely, sometimes even some ice. But we should see definitely a transition in our weather pattern for the first half of March. So this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a trough, and this was the February 1st, 2nd storm. We're looking at, this was a forecast of winds up at the 18,000 foot level, which is where we steer the surface lows or nor'easters at the surface. So you can see a broad, what's called a trough, and this is a dip in the jet stream as it heads east. And whenever you see a closed off center like this, that's pretty favorable for a good winter storm across our area. And especially if the center of it tracks just to our south, that tends to put us in the heavier snow. That's exactly what happened on the February 1st to 2nd storm. And that's why there was such widespread snowfall totals over a foot, not just in southern New England, but across much of the Northeast. Now, the other storm on February 7th, ended up in the jackpot for it. You can see some of the hourly snowfall totals here that I measured that afternoon. And you can see we had almost, essentially 2 to 4 inch snowfall rates from 1 o'clock through about 4 o'clock, and 8.5 inches of snow fell in just about 3 hours. And you can see this magenta bright shading here from Connecticut across northern Rhode Island into the Norwood area. This was a band that actually pivoted in off the ocean that we see with most winter storms. A lot of times they lift through, they may last an hour and then head up to our north, but in this case it pivoted right over Norwood. So it sat over us for that 3 to 4 hour period and was able to dump some really heavy snow right on top of us. So again, this is one of the bands we see of snow with most coastal storms, just happened to set up right on top of us. Outside of this band, I should mention, even though we received nearly a foot, other areas only received about 4 to 5 inches. So if this band passed through or stayed to our south, we would have had snowfall that was maybe 4 to 5 inches at best. So I wanted to show a few winter weather resources we have from the National Weather Service. If you want to find our latest winter weather forecast, we actually have quite a bit of information for you to look at. If you go to our webpage, which is weather.gov/Boston, you can click on the headline up at the top for the latest winter weather forecast, or scroll down, click on this winter weather icon with the snowflakes. That will take you to our winter weather page, which gives you the latest expected snowfall, either in a point value, a single value here, or in a range. And you can also see on the right, we have kind of our best and worst case scenarios. So in other words, what is the least amount of snow we can expect? That's this low end amount. It's pretty much a guarantee of what we're going to see. And then a high end amount, which would be kind of a worst case scenario. So think about that snow band that sat over us. That was pretty much a quote unquote worst case scenario or high end snowfall amount. So it gives you the range of possibilities for a given storm, along with our kind of our best guess here on the left. You can also scroll down and find the chances of different snowfall amounts. So an example would be what's the percentage of us receiving more than 4 inches, more than 6 inches, and you can kind of see here on the top the numbers go down as you get higher and higher based upon a particular event, but that can be kind of useful. And if you scroll all the way down, you can actually choose Norfolk County and drill down for Norwood, so you can kind of see what's our low end snowfall amount. Again, that's kind of our guaranteed, you'll see at least this much. our expected amount, which is the most likely, and then the potential high-end amount, as well as the different probabilities for different snowfall thresholds like I showed on the map. So 3 different resources you have on our winter weather page. Again, it's weather.gov/Boston/winter. If you're on Facebook, I encourage you to follow our office on social media, NWS Boston. This year, we've started to do briefings on Facebook Live for kind of the big storms, not everyone, but we'll usually start these a couple of days in advance, once per day, usually around 5 to 7 p.m. And you'll get a notification if you follow us for things like the big winter storms, when we get into the summer, the big severe weather outbreaks, or if we have tropical storms or hurricanes threatening the area. So again, it's on Facebook. You can also find more information on Twitter or at NWS Boston, or some information on our YouTube channel as well. And speaking of which, we also host webinars on various weather topics and also have event reviews. You can always check our webinar page here, weather.gov/Boston/webinars. We record all of them and put them on our YouTube page, but we also give weather briefings at the end of all of our webinars. So if there's an upcoming storm, we'll talk about that. If the weather's kind of quiet, we'll talk about general weather trends for the next couple of weeks or so. So you're welcome to join us anytime for these webinars. So with that, I thank you for your time. And again, I'm Joe Dellicarpini, Norwood resident, and from the National Weather Service's Boston office.